Hello, everyone. Yeah, this is the video about Manfred von Carstein. We're probably learning more about him just so we can hate him a bit more, you know?
Yeah, screw this guy.
Yeah. He does not seem like an interesting vampire. He just seems like a shit story. Not even in the fun way with Starscream.
Yeah, it just sounds like he's just a dick.
Yeah. Which in a series with vampires, dark elves, and other horrors, that's surprisingly he's high on the list. But yeah.
Yeah.
Videos about characters we all like are great. I mean, everyone likes to hear about a cool character like Vlad von Carstein. He's
Yeah.
a great character, obviously villainous, but he has things about him that are good, like his genuine love for his wife Isabella. That sort of thing makes a character very compelling.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just want to spend time hating on someone. A completely irredeemable piece of filth who deserves every horrible thing coming to them.
True.
Knowing just exactly why they should be kicked squarely in their undead jewels at every single opportunity. Let's talk about Mannfred von Carstein. Manfred is an interesting fella. He's a fairly fun villain, to give him his due credit. He's hammy, he's devoted to his villainous schemes wholeheartedly, and because he's a vampire wizard in Warhammer, he's both great at casting magic and ripping people apart with his bare hands.
Yeah,
But for admittedly
pretty
meta
normal,
reasons,
though.
he's the ultimate in-universe reason for things going as wrong as they possibly could. Doubled with the fact he was already Warhammer Starscream, and you'll notice that a lot of people in the fan base of Warhammer Fantasy hate this.
I didn't expect to hear a man being called Warhammer Starscream, of all things.
And yet, it tracks with what I know of him.
Yeah. I think he does flee at the first sign of actual trouble, so it's very possible. Though I don't think, like Starscream, he will readily admit that he's a coward.
In fairness, I think only the live-action version ever did that.
No, even in the original G1, he admitted that. Like, there are points where he's like, Starscream is a weakling too. He says, yes, but I'm fast.
That's not saying he's a coward. That's saying he's not going to win a fist fight with Devastator.
There are points where he literally yells out that I'm stupid when Megatron tells him about his failure, but yeah.
Okay, that one I'll give you. You're either lying or you're stupid.
I'm stupid. I'm stupid. But yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Man, including me. I hate you, Manfred von Carstein. I hope you explode. So in the name of a completely biased opinion that I will not be putting aside, let's take an entirely unobjective look at Manfred von Carstein.
Let's go.
The vampire that ruined it all. Before we begin, though, hear me out. Manfred von Carstein is many things. A vampire, slimy in every sense of the word, but he is in many ways quite smart. He knows how to do what he needs to do. And I bet if it existed in his world, he would be a proud user of Brilliant, the sponsor of today's video.
I've never
Brilliant is
used
the best
them,
way for
honestly.
anyone to learn math, data
Also,
science,
if those who
and
don't know, I am using my
Learning can be a
vampire
boring
design
and
for this
tedious
video.
thing, but Brilliant
Once again.
thankfully knows that the best way to learn is to make it interesting, and it really
This
is
is
fun
more
to
my
learn on
Halloween
Brilliant.
design,
It's got
but
all sorts of
I still
visuals
love
and mini
it.
games while you're going through the
If I
courses,
could,
but
I-
you'll never have that moment like in school where your
It's a
head's on
design
your
made by a
elbow
good
and you're
friend
trying
I've
not to
had
fall
even
asleep,
before I
but you
met
just
a
can't
lot
stop
of the
yourself from
Vtubers I
passing
know
out for
now.
a second. You'll have the opposite, where all of a sudden you'll realize that, hey,
She made me
I'm
my first
actually
fan art,
enjoying
so
this
I'm
lesson.
proud of it.
To make it even better, it's completely at your own pace and
cute.
customizable. Stuck on a topic? Just redo it again until you're good to go. Want to learn something a bit more advanced? No problems there either. And while you're at it, take all the breaks between lessons you need to. Brilliant isn't going anywhere because it understands everyone goes through learning in life at their own pace. I decided to check out the Predicting with Probability course. Warhammer Tabletop is all about comparing stats between models to see who comes out on top after all, so I figured if I could get the hang of probability, I'd be better equipped to play the game. Things like what are the odds this attack actually hits, that sort of deal. And that's the beauty of Brilliant. I'm choosing to take this lesson because I want to be better at war games, and you can choose any of Brilliant's thousands of lessons for your career, schooling, or because you too want to get better at throwing dice around. And just to give you
Who
a bit
doesn't
more
like throwing
incentive,
dice around?
using my link in the description, which is
Give
also
'em the
on
yeet.
screen, you can get the first
Yeah.
30 days of Brilliant completely free. To top it off, the first 200 of you to do so will get 20% off your annual plan. That's http://brilliant.org/PancreasNoWork/ for
Slash,
33
slash,
days
slash.
and 20% off the annual plan for the first 200 users.
slashing
This is
all
never a
the
bad
boxes.
time to start learning, so try Brilliant out today using my
I'll take
link
this
and start
press
now.
and
Now
cut
then,
it in half.
Manfred von
Oh my
Kumrak.
God.
Manfred von Carstein is, as you could probably
Did you hear him? Let me go back.
Go back a
Listen.
second.
Manfred
I
von
was quipping.
Carstein is Manfred von //brilliant.org/PancreasNoWork days and 20% off the annual plan for the first 200 users. There's never a bad time to start learning, so try Brilliant out today using my link and start now. Now then, Manlet von Cumrag. Manfred von Carstein is, as you could probably guess from the name, a vampire of the von Carstein bloodline of vampires in Warhammer. While nowhere near as long as Cetra's, he does have a few titles to his name.
Alright.
They are Master of the Black Arts, which I'm sure Nagash would love to take issue with,
Yeah.
Lord of Sylvania, which Vlad probably takes issue with,
Yeah.
True Inheritor of the line of Vashanesh, which Vlad definitely takes issue with, because
Yeah.
that was his original name, and there's no way Vlad's happy with this little shit boot. The Pale
course.
Count, which, yeah, fair. And finally, he who is destined to unite all the realms of man under his rightful sovereignty, which everyone takes issue with. Are you feeling?
I'm pretty sure he gave himself that last one.
Yeah.
These feel like titles he quite literally boofed on himself. He's really being like Starscream right now.
Extremely.
Because here's the thing with titles. They are not, like, given to yourself. They are earned. They're not...
Exactly.
Someone else has to put them upon you. It's quite literally the saying of, any man who has to tell people I am king is no true king.
Precisely. The real king...
He just has to step in, quite literally.
I feel the same way about people who say, I am strong. No, you're fucking not.
It's quite literally like in a book. You don't have to say someone is strong. You can show them lifting a boulder.
Yeah.
In the bias yet? Prior to him becoming a vampire, the most solid thing we have on him is that he was a prince. His vampiric origin story has two potential beginnings, one of which is a lot simpler, but the other of which is of arguable canonicity. The first is that he was just the first vampire Vlad sired, and they traveled the world for a bit before separating. The second is that his name used to be Khalid al-Muntasir, an assistant to Neferata. Originally the child of a Proto-Arabian noble, he and his younger sister Almar were turned into vampires by Neferata in exchange for the classic evil bad guy stuff, like promises of power and whatnot.
Sounds
Neferata
about
got
right.
into a fight with Usharan, Khalid tried to stage a coup against her, but accidentally got his sister killed in the process, and then as punishment, Neferata forced him to watch his sister's body decompose.
Oh.
Yikes. Also take note of this, because it's one of the only times Manfred will ever feel sympathy for another being. He's then forced to serve Nagash directly for a bit, then Sigmar does that thing he does where he bashes someone head in with Galmaraz, and now Manfred is pretty much alone. In this version, he's a Lamian bloodline vampire, and the Lamians aren't the biggest fans of men, so he would have been at best treated like a second-rate citizen by his own bloodline. So he shacks up with Vlad, takes the name Manfred instead, and the rest is history. This one is pretty interesting because it gives
Wait, did he go back there? 1 second.
Manfred instead, and the rest is history. And so he would have been at best treated like a second-rate citizen by his own bloodline.
Wow.
So he shacks up with Vlad, takes the name Manfred
understandable
instead,
why he
and
would
the
do
rest
that.
is history. This one is pretty interesting because it gives Manfred quite the secret that he's not even a true von Carstein. It could potentially explain why he hates Vlad so much and tries to get him killed, because Vlad knows his secret that could be a huge blow to Manfred's legitimacy as von Carstein. That all being said, the canonicity of this one is in question for a couple of reasons. One is that unless I'm mistaken, this is all out-of-universe confirmation by Josh Reynolds that this Khalid fellow is actually Manfred. The other major reason is in-universe, that being that when Manfred was trying to resurrect Nagash, he was fully planning on absorbing his power for himself. If he was around when Nagash was alive and kicking the first time, that means he was present for the fall of Nehekara and all that. So Manfred should have known damn well there wasn't a chance in hell at him pulling it off. At the end of the day, though, whatever interpretation you prefer works equally well since the meat of his story begins later on. More specifically, it begins during the First Vampire War, when the Empire of Man faced off against the Vampire Counts of Sylvania. Vlad at this point was fully committed to the Vampire Lord shtick, and decided that he would be a better emperor than anyone else. Being a vampire, the only way he could do that was by raising an army of hundreds of thousands of the undead and bringing ruin to the
Do you see
Empire.
my amazing governing skills?
Of summoning a bunch of undead. Yeah, usually because Sylvania used to be a part of the Empire, though it's a rebelling province now, and it's where the vampire cats hang out. Of course, Vlad was the one to first try and attack, but, you know. Yeah, and also, yeah, Nagash eventually is a god of necromancy that wants to become true death, if I remember correctly. But, yeah. We obviously don't know much about Manfred's lore, but him actually being from the vampire group that, you know, is a matriarchy and wouldn't allow him to do much, so he switched over to a side that would allow him, you know, to actually rise in a rank, makes perfect sense. especially
Yep,
for,
yep.
especially for someone that wants power more than anything. And the idea of
Yep.
them being treated like a second citizen is quite literally repulsive. Which, I mean, to a vampire lord, yeah. I would be like, what the fuck are you doing? I'm leaving.
by force. Manfred's role during all of this was as one of Vlad's generals, and to his credit, he did fairly well. In one night, the entire ruling family of the city of Nuln was dead by his hands. But it was at this point Manfred decided that he was going to go independent. Clearly, he was too good to be subservient to Vlad von Carstein. Somehow he didn't explode from the sheer level of wrongness from this line of thought, and he began plotting. Arrogant though he was, he knew damn well trying to fight Vlad head-on was a death sentence. But he also knew the secret of how Vlad was able to resurrect and come back every time someone managed to kill him, the von Carstein ring. His plan was simple. He informed the Grand Theogenist, aka the Pope of Sigmar, about Vlad's weakness, who then strong-armed the thief Felix Mann into stealing it off of Vlad while he slept. In full transparency, I was originally going to make fun of Manfred for not just doing it himself, but then realized that vampires all kind of have to sleep at the same time. At first glance, it's like, Manfred, you stay up an extra hour, pound back a monster energy or something.
They can't go out in the light.
The sun is a hard counter to that strategy, so good job instead, Manfred. Anyways, this Felix Mann was apparently Skyrim's stealth build levels of sneaky, so he got the ring off of Vlad, and when Vlad awoke, he went absolutely berserk.
Of course he did.
In his rage, he ordered his entire army to storm Altdorf. Since I will inevitably talk about Vladdy Daddy later, the short of it is that Vlad nearly won. Between getting staked through the heart and the Sigmar Pope jumping on top of him and pinning him there, he finally died for good.
That's actually pretty cool.
Felix, no, not that one, realized that with the Pope dead, no one would believe him when he said he was promised enough land and money to live comfortably for the rest of his life because he stole something. There was no written agreement, just a verbal one between the two. He took off with the von Carstein ring alongside a book of Nagash he stole from Manfred.
Makes sense.
Manfred naturally wasn't having any of this tomfoolery because the books of Nagash are magical cheat codes for people without moral codes. So he tracked Felix down, took back the book and Vlad's ring, cut off Felix's hands, and left. So far, we're up to 2 potential betrayals, one of which was him betraying someone for absolutely no reason other than his own ego, and astonishingly, one case where Manfred was the one betrayed first. I have no doubt in my mind that Felix would have eventually been killed by Manfred for a quick laugh, but Manfred didn't actually betray first this time, so good on him, I guess. After that, he goes back to Nuln, kills what's left of the royal family there because he had nothing better to do and it was a way to pass the time, and started studying the book of Nagash he had. Realizing that not only did this book contain more knowledge than he could have dreamed of, but there were 8 more of the damn things, as well as God only knows how many other sites of necromantic power for him to cover, he goes on a sort of pilgrimage around the world. He leaves a witch hunter turned vampire in the court of Conrad von Carstein, who is exactly as insane as the name Conrad usually implies in Warhammer, and
oh no. Literally a vampire hunter turned vampire sounds awful and insane. In all of the worst words. I mean, what?
I'm sorry, I'm just remembering that there's a character in Toho who is a maid that's basically a big reference to Dio. And one of the possible she has a few possible backstories. She might have been Jack the Ripper. She might have been a vampire hunter. Regardless, she's now the maid for a vampire.
Yeah.
She's going to throw knives at you.
And apparently stop time with a watch. Anyway.
I'm not sure if she needs the watch.
She seems to.
His decades-long gap year. He also threatened his vampire assistant when he asked the completely innocuous question of why he didn't just kill Conrad, because Manfred has exactly one state of being.
Fucking Megatron.
In the meantime, Conrad...
he's acting like Megatron right there when the dude just asked a question and he was ready to backhand him.
Shout out to that time Megatron tore out Starscream's knock throat.
Every vampire that even slightly criticized him sparked a slight diplomatic incident known as the Second Vampire War, and then died. Manfred traveled to such places as Castle Drachenfels, a place famous for ruining the good times you might have had while playing Vermintide 2. Lamia, since it was the origin of vampires and everyone has to steal things from the Tomb Kings at least once to be taken seriously. And Nagash Azar, where he made deals with creatures supposedly too unspeakable to name. But to give a spoiler, I think we can figure out the name of at least one of those creatures in Nagash Azar. All throughout this time, his knowledge and magical
Yeah.
power were growing to greater
I'm
and
gonna name the
greater
other one
heights.
Steve.
It came to a point that while Vlad may have been stronger than him, Manfred was undoubtedly the greatest spellcaster the von Carsteins had ever seen.
Oh.
Conrad was also a contender for some sort of first-place position, I'm sure. The von Carstein most likely to eat babies or something. I don't know. That doesn't matter because, as I said, Conrad is now very dead, leaving Manfred as the only true contender for the von Carstein throne.
That's
This
such
was the true reason he hadn't just outright killed Conrad. When you
Oh.
kill the king to take his place, that opens up any schmuck with an ego and a sword to do the same to you.
Yeah,
But
it
because
really
Conrad
does.
had killed
Yeah.
so many other vampires and hadn't died directly to Manfred, that ensured Manfred not only could head the von Carstein's with legitimacy, but also that anyone who tried to oppose him was probably already dead. It's amazing
Oh
how
my
even when
God.
he's not technically betraying anyone, it still really feels like he's betraying them. Of course,
Quite literally, the other guy killed everyone already, so no one would be there to try and backstab him because there's no one left.
Well then.
It's like the perfect situation for a Starscream, really.
Yeah, it seems like it.
There's no one left to backstab you, so all you have to do is knock down the one guy that's been going crazy.
in saying that, he also invited any possible competitors he had to Castle Drakenhof and had them killed under a flag of truce.
Of course he
there
did.
it is. You just couldn't quite shake the old
a
instincts,
dick.
could you, Manfred? He also
Yeah.
mixed their ashes with cursed iron and turned it into a snazzy new set of armor for himself.
Of course he
At least
did.
he knows how to recycle. He was throughout this still
I hate
pursuing
that
the
armor,
arcane
though. It
arts,
looks
adding his
really
own fires
bad.
to the evil light.
Yeah, it does not look cool at all. Like, the shoulder pads kind of look cool if he had, like, gauntlets or something, but he has his, like, forearms completely exposed. Like, he needs to have it look more dragony if he really wants to make it work.
Yeah.
Library of Evil Necromancy under Castle Drakenhof. This will become relevant later when a certain human and dwarf stumble their way towards the castle on various different
Oh.
occasions.
Oh,
But for now,
hey.
Manfred has to regrow the power base he
wonder
burned to
who
the ground in
those
the
could
process of
be.
taking it over. He started looking for new members to join his forces, finding
Oh.
vampires and necromancers from across the world and convincing them one way or another to join up with him. He was quite
Okay.
slimy with it, oftentimes bribing them, promising them power, or flattering them, but sometimes he would just make them bend the knee by force.
Of course
One
he
of these
would.
people was Helman Gorst. Helman Gorst continues to not at all be important to anyone's story in Warhammer, but I've
Wow.
seen too many videos of him recreating World War Z and Total War to not at least give him a shout out. He made no overt moves against the Empire throughout this time, though.
I'm scared.
Everyone outside of Sylvania thought that with Conrad's death, the threat was finally over, and he was happy to let them keep thinking that until he was ready. With
Of
his
course he
power
did.
base of necromancers and vampires secured, it was time for Phase 2. He had his commanders,
Phase
now he
2.
just needed the army. He traveled across the wilderness of the
Phase
Empire of Man,
3.
rummaging through crypts, burial grounds, and
Of
really
course he
anywhere
did.
with a more than zero amount of buried dead people. In addition to the classic zombies and skeletons, he would also raise wights, banshees, and other spirits to his cause.
Oh.
because You can never go wrong with a few extra hero units.
Yeah.
When the Empire was racked with the Civil War, as it tends to be every few
That's
hundred
fair.
years, Manfred made his play. He made the
I need-
ballsy move of
I
invading
need to make the reference that the Empire of Man here is based off of the Holy Roman Empire. Which, do you know anything about the Holy Roman Empire?
They're what came after Rome itself, right?
Kind of. What came after Rome itself was the Byzantine Empire. Well, the Holy Roman Empire was founded later by
Yeah, no,
Charlemagne.
it's not Rome. It's somebody taking Rome's name and parading it around as a skin suit.
Listen, that happens by a bunch of kingdoms. You're gonna have to be more specific with that.
Acting like they're the true successors to the great empire of Rome.
You're
And
gonna have
we
to.
all know that's the Swiss.
You're gonna have to be more specific than that. And no, it's not the Swiss. Anyway, it's one of. It's basically it was as Charlemagne put it, his rise to restore the Roman kingdom and blah blah blah. He was originally king of the Franks, but anyway, let's go on to this point. It's basically a hodgepodge of little kingdoms that basically cats that needed to be constantly heard to do stuff. It was a mess.
Sounds about right.
the Skaven to use their tunnels, and across the Empire
Oh,
to
use
send his
Skaven
forces
tunnels.
with undead Skaven now bolstering their
Skaven.
ranks. Combine the
Undead
Civil War with
Skaven.
the onset of winter and the end of the summer campaigning
Zombie
season,
Ratman.
and Manfred faced pretty much zero opposition in the stages of what was now the
That
Third
sounds like a
Vampire
fucking
War.
joke.
Entire villages were razed
I
and
know.
turned into more.
but he does
The
this.
Civil War with the onset of winter and the end of the summer campaigning season, and Manfred faced pretty much zero opposition in the stages of what was now the Third Vampire War. Entire villages were razed and turned into more undead, and eventually this started snowballing in a rather morbid sense. Towns would hear of Manfred's horde approaching them, they would all flee, and then they would all freeze to death for Manfred to resurrect as more zombies. This part of the war became known as the Winter War, and Manfred destroyed what forces were cobbled together to try and stop him. By the time he got to Altdorf, it appeared as if the city was entirely undefended, and Manfred's ego was at this point in time close to achieving apotheosis as its own chaos god.
Oh my god.
He was about to go beyond what Conrad and even Vlad had ever achieved. He wasn't just going to be a vampire count, he was going to be a vampire emperor. Then the
always remember, even if you fucked up, you haven't fucked up quite bad enough to spawn a new god.
Yeah, you can thank the Eldar for that. No matter what anyone else says about different races, you can't fuck up as bad as the Eldar did.
They didn't fuck up, they just fucked.
No, they definitely fucked up, because it was blood orgies.
Yeah.
And that's all kinds of fucked up.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue that.
Anyway.
Fancy books that Warhead had ever achieved. He wasn't just going to be a vampire count, he was going to be a vampire emperor. Then the Pope walked out with one of the few evil necromancy books that weren't written by Nagash, read some passages from it, and Manfred's army started falling apart. On the one hand, this is rather anticlimactic, but on the other hand, it's also incredibly funny.
Yes,
it is.
On
the cusp of victory, and then whoops, turns out the Empire has their own store of magical cheat code artifacts.
Because
to
of
be
course they
entirely
do.
fair, though, the Grand Theogenist read out a spell whose whole purpose was unbinding other spells. He didn't just start desperately reading passages from the book and it happened to work out. Manfred pulled his now rather reduced army back since it was at this point the Empire revealed...
Basically, like, skeletons and zombies are more or less just held together by magic. So...
I would assume so.
You know, they have no being or sense of self. They basically march in order. So, they're not... So, yeah, if you can read the right spell, you can just knock them out.
Entire army was waiting for this exact moment inside of Altdorf. He had to accept he wasn't getting the throne just yet, but he wasn't defeated either. He figured if he couldn't just take the Empire by force immediately, he'd starve it out. So he headed on over to Marienburg to besiege that place instead. Marienburg responded by mobilizing the entirety of itself, and even the High Elves decided
That's
to get
quite a
in
bit
on
of
kicking Manfred in the
mobilization.
crotch
Are those
fun.
boats?
Yes, those are boats on land with cannons in them.
Are they being carried or are they walking?
They have giant wheels, as you can see right here.
Oh. Why do they have wheelboats?
I don't know. They have cannons, they have tanks, I don't know why they have
Marienburg
wheelboats.
responded by mobilizing the entirety of itself, and even the High Elves decided to get in on the kicking Manfred in the crotch fun. The High Elven mage detected Nagash's foul spirits skulking about Manfred and subtly guiding him, so they figured they better show the humans how to handle such things. While no one had any mass counterspells to cuck him out of an entire army this time around, this was balanced out by the fact that he couldn't get inside of Marienburg in time to fortify against the forces of the entire Empire, which were hot on his
Don't ever do that
so
when I get
Marienburg
okay?
and what followed this second defeat is a long-as-hell game of cat and mouse where both sides took turns for who was who. The Empire would butcher Manfred's army, but Manfred would escape and raise more troops. Manfred would defeat an Empire army, and then an even bigger one would descend on him and kill his necromancers and vampires.
So this sounds less like Starscream now and more like Cobra Commander. Where he constantly escapes and comes back with some other plan or something and says, next time, G.I. Joe.
Next time, an Empire of Man.
Pretty much. Someone just make him look like Cobra Commander somehow. I don't know.
So, at the end of the day, he's Chris Latta.
Who?
The guy who voiced both of them.
Wait, what? He voiced both?
Yeah.
Huh. I didn't expect that.
Sadly, he passed a while ago.
Aw, that makes me sad.
But, you know, Hasbro also,
Hasbro did a thing.
they also released a toy that was Cobra Commander piloting Starscream, so, you know, I'm here for that.
That's actually kind of cool.
He was also, let's see here, guest starred on Star Trek, was Mo Sislak and Mr. Burns in the first season of The Simpsons.
Huh.
Animation voice action debut, Space Battleship Yamato.
Huh.
Well, goddamn.
Yeah, that's some... Wow.
Oh shit, he was decomposed in humanoids.
We should probably move forward.
Yes, I'm gonna get
empires. On 2 separate occasions, he was forced to retreat back to Sylvania, and eventually the Empire came together as a whole and formed one grand alliance.
Basically, we're done with your shit,
needed to
army.
put him down, sensing there was an opportunity to.
Basically, this was quite literally the kind of army where everyone's tired of your shit army. Quite literally combining all together just because they're sick of you in particular.
Assault Manfred von Carstein, the dwarves also joined in on the
are
front
gonna get punched in the nuts.
Empire in the invasion of Sylvania. While Manfred's undead hordes were still larger than the forces of man and dwarf, they were nonetheless no match for the sheer level of hatred leveled at his dumb, stupid, dumb, bald idiot head. Even the marshes of Sylvania failed to slow them down, and Manfred was drawn into battle at a place known as Hell Fen. As a last-ditch effort, he went to find the ring he had stolen from Vlad so that when he was inevitably killed, he would just show back up later nonplussed. But someone grabbed it from wherever he took it, so now he was really up the creek without a paddle. His last-ditch effort was not the nail gun, but to fight the armies of man and dwarf individually, because otherwise even he knew he was no match. Unfortunately, the Elector Count Martin of Stirland had his forces crash into Manfred from 3 different angles.
Smart.
With his forces having encircled Manfred's, the only thing left running through Martin's head was "fuck it, we ball." Manfred tried to cut and run, and that was when Martin descended on him on his griffin mount. Though Martin was pretty badly wounded in the ensuing fight, Manfred was killed by the runefang Martin held, and his body sank to the bottom of the swamps of Hell Fen. Now, when I tell you that they never found his body, you're almost certainly going to think that GW was pulling the classic, "oh, he wasn't actually dead" trick, but no, he died here. Manfred was put down like a dog. And then a necromancer named Stillman did what necromancers do best. Meddle with powers beyond their comprehension. And raising corpses is what they do best, but that's you know, the metaphorical bet. Fuck you. Stillman didn't have much going for him, aside from his go-getter attitude. He wanted to bring back Manfred to usher in another age of darkness, yada yada yada. He kidnapped an innkeeper's daughter because blah blah blah, sacrificed a virgin to bring back an evil monster, and then a hunting party killed him before he could finish the ritual. Unfortunately for the world at large, Stillman was also a virgin, and the ritual evidently just needed a virgin. The whole fair maiden part was just an assumption he made. Because he wasn't burned or taken away from Manfred's corpse, the blood that dripped into the body was enough to complete the ritual and bring Manfred back. Now, once again, I bet I know what you're thinking. This story is going to end with the entire party of hunters getting obliterated while Manfred laughs maniacally into the end credits. But no, because while some of the people in this story absolutely bit the dust during the course of it, 2 of the people present were none other than Gotrek.
Thank God!
Manfred woke up, took one look at the pair, and realized he was in a Gotrek and Felix story, and just took off running as fast as he could. Gotrek even tried to taunt him, and
this is correct.
Was like, "I'm good, thanks. I choose unlife." And funnily enough, this isn't even his only run-in with Gotrek and Felix. In
Smartest
story,
call ever made.
That Mr. Gurnison, there has been a second vampire resurrection ritual, this time to bring back Vlad von Carstein. To top it off, they planned on using Felix as a sacrifice to bring him back. Oh no, we can't kill Felix. We got at least 4 more books out of him. Manfred, meanwhile, was going to be the undead vessel for Vlad's spirit to inhabit. Gotrek naturally interrupts this because anyone trying to harm Felix by this point of their story is going to be swiftly reduced to past tense, but Manfred actually got in on this too on account of absolutely hating
their
Vlad.
ises to was.
Half succeeded, and a Vargulf was created that kinda sorta was Vlad, but not really. And then Manfred, Gotrek, and Felix all team up to kill it. Then Gotrek tries to kill Manfred, who once again dips and runs.
Of course
again,
he does.
Can't blame the guy for running from Gotrek as fast as he can. Also, major props to him. Seriously, the dude survived 2 separate run-ins with Gotrek and Felix. Greater demons can't say that. Before we get to the end times, he was also working with one of Nagash's former lieutenants, known only as the Dread King. Unfortunately, they made the mistake of kidnapping a noblewoman who turned out to be Karl Franz's cousin. So an army of mercenaries with an oath to protect her promptly put a stop to that.
Of course
the Dread King died. Everyone involved thought Manfred died too, but this time, no, Manfred was not actually dead. Manfred continued on being an evil vampire, and at some point started working directly on bringing back Nagash. He kidnapped Aliathra, the daughter of Alariel, the Ever-Queen and Tyrion.
Why?
Her unkidnapped by a massive army of elves with Tyrion leading them, and a second massive army of dwarfs.
For those who don't know, Tyrion, or since you don't know, Tyrion is the Phoenix King, the main leader of the High Elves.
Oh.
Yeah. He's the son of the last Phoenix King who went on a doom-slaying rant because he thought his wife was dead by demons. So,
yeah.
By Thorgrim, then re-kidnapped her during that fight. Poor Aliathra. End times now, and Manfred has quite the important role in ruining absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Balthasar Gelt put up the massive
Yeah.
wall of faith around Sylvania, completely isolating it from the world. This put a bit of a cramp on Manfred's plans, but Arkin the Black was also working on bringing back Nagash, so they worked together to get all the ingredients needed to perform the ritual. This included, but was not limited to, Nagash's hand that had been cut off forever ago, Aliathra, the Fey Enchantress who was given to Manfred by Draika of all people,
How?
and Volkmar the Grim, who was trying to purge Sylvania of undead taint. He did not, in fact, purge Sylvania of undead taint,
Sadly
and did,
enough.
in fact, become the body
Rip.
that Nagash's spirit hijacked
Damn.
to enter the world stronger than ever before. Just before that happened, though, Eltharion the Grim broke Manfred's arm, which is at least one nice thing to come out of this.
Yeah.
Eltharion then got aged to dust by Arkin immediately afterwards, but I don't blame Arkin for doing that.
Damn it.
Just the writers of the end times.
Yeah.
Nagash horrified Manfred. For the
Yeah.
first time in perhaps his entire life, he realized just how insignificant he was to the truly big players in the world. As he
Good.
watched Nagash destroy Nehekara
Good.
and devour the god of the dead, he realized his plan to hijack Nagash's resurrection and steal the power for himself was a fool's dream. Oh, he also got Luther Harkon killed by breaking his legs, cutting off one of his hands, and leaving him to fight against an endless horde of demons.
Of course he
Thank you,
did.
Manfred. Very go to hell. Manfred for a while didn't do too much of a note after
Yeah.
this. When Vlad decided to be a cool dude as he does and help out the living against chaos, Manfred tried to take his place. Instead of making Vlad look bad, though, he didn't really do anything and just ended up losing to Nurgle forces. He did at one point kill a great
course.
unclean one by himself, but Nagash had previously to that murdered an entire combined force of Skaven and Nurgle forces, including a great
Sorry,
unclean
give
one.
one.
So, quite frankly, anything short of Deso, he didn't really do anything and just
I do
ended up
like that Vlad actually sided with Order, though.
losing to Nurgle forces. He did at one point kill a great unclean one by himself, but Nagash had previously to that murdered an entire combined
Sorry,
force
there's
of
dogs
Skaven
barking
and
outside.
Nurgle forces, including a great unclean
That's
one.
fine.
So, quite frankly, anything short of decimating an entire army at once with Death's magic is gonna fail to impress me, Manfred. That's what happens when you bring back your faction's
Yeah.
big bad, Manfred. The Skaven and Nurgle forces, including a great unclean one. So,
Yeah.
quite frankly, anything short of decimating an entire army at once with Death's magic is gonna fail to impress me, Manfred. That's
Yeah.
what happens when you bring back your faction's
Yeah.
big bad, Manfred.
Yeah.
Nothing you do going forward is gonna look good by comparison. The funniest thing to ever happen in Warhammer then comes when Nagash sends him to Athel Loren to make a very tenuous peace with the living. For what it's worth, he doesn't initially do anything to ruin everything. When Nagash offers the person who killed Aliathra as a token of goodwill, Manfred points and laughs at Arkin. He thinks
my
the
God.
dumb, snooty lich is finally gonna get everything that's coming to him. Then suddenly his mount throws him off and he's put in a box by everyone present.
Oh.
Turns out that almost no one left knew Arkin was involved, while everyone else saw Manfred's pale ass kidnap Aliathra. So they stuff him in
Yeah.
a cage and leave him to rot for all time.
Good.
Then Bellicor, first demon prince and all-around dickhead, goes snooping around Athel Loren to cause some chaos when he finds Manfred. Manfred had been able to hear about the goddess Lilith's plan to create a new world free of chaos, and in exchange for freedom, he rats out the entire thing to Bellicor.
Of course
that
he
whole
does.
safe haven plotline then goes completely nowhere as the Chaos Gods presumably destroy the place.
Of course
On the
they
one
do.
hand, most of the people going there were Bretonnian Grail Knights, so I'm glad it exploded. On
His thing against Bretonnian Grail Knights because they're really cool and have basically they're magical knights. Their whole thing is that they believe in the honor of chivalry and worship this elf god that likes them better than it likes the elves, which is kind of funny.
We stole your god. What you gonna do about it?
Yeah, the reason he doesn't like them is because I'm pretty sure he keeps losing to them on the tabletop, or he lost to them a bunch on the tabletop because they have a lot
Rip.
of cavalry.
Rip.
On the other hand, what the hell, Manfred, you total dick. Manfred then goes to Middenheim to join forces with Archaon.
course
Archaon
he
knows
does.
damn well that trusting Manfred is a fantastic way to ruin your plans and tells
Yeah.
him to piss off, leaving the vampire now alone in a world that's got a foot in the grave. Not really having anything better to do with himself at the moment, he just kind of skulks around the chaos forces being miserable at his place in life and almost regrets his actions. That is until the last-ditch effort to save the world starts happening, and he realizes he gets another chance to kill Vlad. Not to take
Oh
his
my
place or
God.
anything like the first time, he's just being a bitter asshole.
Of course he
since
is.
Vlad is a total sweetheart, he sacrifices himself to cleanse his wife of chaos corruption,
Aw.
robbing Manfred of any meaningful reason to even be there. And then he decides to do the really funny thing that he does.
Which
in order to
is?
spite Vlad one last time, he will fully embrace everything that makes him Manfred. He will not just be a treacherous, backstabbing weasel. He will become the treacherous, backstabbing
Wonderful.
weasel. One who will have songs sung about him until the end of time about how much of a prick he was. The incarnates of magic were moments away away from sealing the Chaos Rift Archaon created. As the ritual was going on and it looked like the day was actually going to be saved at the last minute, Manfred walked on up and literally stabbed Balthasar Gelt in the back.
Yeah.
Balthasar Gelt exploded in a burst of magical energy, driving Manfred insane and ruining the ritual for everyone. This would suck for Manfred, much as he deserved it, but a more immediate problem for him is that Tyrion saw him do this. This resulted in Teclis's death, meaning Tyrion has now seen Manfred kill his daughter, his brother, and ultimately everything he's ever known and loved, because the world's about to end. Before the final curtain call, Manfred gets everything he deserves, having the power of the sun stake directly through his heart as Tyrion cuts him down. Then the world ends, all because Manfred von Carstein is physically incapable of doing anything non-treacherous. Thank you, Manfred von Carstein. Beyond all other things, the first Warhammer setting dies with a whimper because you couldn't hold yourself back for 5 minutes. At least he's dead now. Nope, just kidding.
Oh, God
he
damn
returns
it.
in Age of Sigmar as the Mortarch of Night, his old job during the end times that Nagash saw fit to bring back. For some reason, he didn't bring back Vlad or anyone worth keeping, but there's actually some reasoning behind Nagash bringing back Manfred, even if Vlad and Isabella should have come along for the ride. Manfred is kept around for a couple of key reasons. One is that despite being a treacherous snake, he's powerful, so throwing Manfred at an enemy commander will at the very least hurt someone else's forces a bit. Another is that Manfred, being a treacherous snake, is a bit of a roadblock to Neferata, who also returns in AOS and is also a bit of a treacherous snake herself. Those two constantly getting into betrayal with each other and the less powerful vampires means that they're spending less time directly screwing with Nagash and his plans.
Sounds about
and
right.
to top it all off, it's fun to torture Manfred whenever he messes up, or Nagash just kinda feels like it. Nagash, being rather cross with Manfred for the whole destroying the world thing, stuck Manfred in a land where everything decays forever, himself included. Manfred couldn't die, but he did have to live in a nationwide version of Chicago for all eternity, which is quite frankly a fate worse than a death I can imagine. For his part in things, Manfred created a nation called Carsteinia, a recreation where everyone loves Manfred and he gets to rule over fake versions of Vlad, Conrad, and everyone else. He initially created the whole thing to make himself feel better about how shit his life is. Then he miraculously had the slightest moment of introspection and realized that, wow, this is incredibly pathetic. All it really did was remind him of how all the actual versions of these people were better than him in every way, so he rarely spends time in the nation he nominally rules.
That's
When
kind of
Chaos
funny.
invaded, he tried to fight off a Khornate army and failed, and pulled the classic Manfred von Carstein and abandoned everyone there to die while he ran away. He was captured by a Chaos Lord, but was eventually freed by a Stormcast named Tarsus, who in his pre-Stormcast life was a man named Tarson and one of Manfred's living allies. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is important, because it's either the second or first time Manfred feels any sort of positive emotion or regret towards another being, depending of course on if you consider his Lamian origin story to be the true one. Tarsus wanted to be guided towards Nagash in exchange for freeing Manfred, as he had a message for the Skelepope, which Manfred actually obliged with no funny business. Of course, Nagash is a big fan of the scaly practice of shooting the messenger, and when Nagash captured the Stormcast, Manfred fled, though not after Tarsus tells him that he doesn't actually hold Manfred's treachery against him. Manfred shockingly felt guilty about what he had done to Tarsus, and pleaded with Nagash to let him go. Even more shockingly, Nagash agreed, saying he was done with Tarsus and let his soul go. For the first time I think I'll ever say this, Manfred von Carstein did a good deed there. At some point he also met Balthasar Gelt, now reborn as Balthasarum, and while they didn't quite recognize each other, they both did feel a sense of deja vu. I don't believe it was stated whether or not Balthasar also felt an inexplicable urge to slam Manfred's head between a doorframe, but I imagine he did. As for his overall position in Grand Alliance death,
it seems like
Nagash's chief lieutenants and in charge of larger scale operations. More tactical and nuanced stuff is left to the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, but if Nagash just wants the general presence of death in an area, he'll tell Manfred to swamp a location with zombies. The sort of thing to bring down the property value of an area. He still wants to be free of Nagash's rule and hasn't made any true progress on it, but ever since Nagash had his body obliterated by Teclis, he's perhaps for the first time able to potentially make some solid ground towards that goal. He hates Arcan and wishes he was dead, but knows that he's still going to return even after being thrown into the depths of Heish by Eltharion. Overall, he's been feeling pretty good about himself lately for the first time in eons. Someone should really put a stop to that. And since I can't think of anything even remotely resembling a segue, let's do or don't Manfred von Carstein now. Thinking of lore positives is going to be a real tricky one this time around, but if you like schemy bastards, you can't do much better than Manfred. I would personally recommend a Skaven for that, but if you want Starscream but a vampire instead of a rat, Manfred's your go-to choice. He's also the sort of guy to win at all costs, no matter the morality of a course of action or lack thereof. So if you like that sort of villain, then go for him. He's also obviously a returning character from Warhammer Fantasy, so if that's what you want in your Death Army, he's gonna be perfect. His armor on his War Scroll is even called the Armor of Tempelhof, so he's still rocking that iron armor he made from his dead friends.
Still looks
back
bad.
then. Manfred's also a reasonably proactive character. He's always being proactive in the worst possible ways, but Manfred has never been afraid to get out there and do his best, even when he really shouldn't. If you prefer your armies to be the ones going out and making the first move, then Manfred is definitely the guy for you. The moment he learned of Nagash and Arkan's defeat by the Lumineth, he annexed some of Neferata's territory into his own. He's gonna rock the boat no matter how many holes it has in it. I'm done saying nice things about Manfred as a character now, so let's move on to his tabletop stuff. Unsurprisingly, the best wizard of the von Carsteins is a pretty decent spellcasting choice to have on the battlefield. He always comes with the spell Wind of Death and can cast 2 spells as well as unbind 2 spells a turn. He's certainly not the best spellcaster in the setting, but he's not bad at it. He's also pretty good in melee, surprisingly enough for a wizard. Of course, he's mounted on an undead bone golem thing, which probably helps. He's got a whole bevy of melee attacks to use, and those spirits on his model actually help with those ghostly dagger attacks on the War Scroll, which is nice, even if those attacks themselves aren't anything to write home about. When he kills something with his rather unfortunately named Geistvor sword, he can buff nearby units to give him an extra attack. The attacks the sword inflicts need to be
Eater of
accounted
Ghosts? Soul Eater? It's not that bad a name.
Geistvor.
Yeah.
Last, so you can't open with the sword to get the buffs, but if you toss him at a unit of, say, clan rats, he'll probably get the buff off. He can also fly, starts with 16 inches of movement, and can charge instead of just making D6 inches when he's given the redeploy command. This makes him pretty phenomenal at picking off weaker units and characters, though anything stronger than him or even in the same point cost category could likely give him some trouble. And lastly, for the positives, his model. It's good. I don't have a lot to say.
I like this thing.
I think it's overall.
I don't know what it is, but I like
guess
it.
I wish the orange bits in the inside of his mount looked a bit less like melted.
But I do, not like that's
Lego Star Wars studs, but I don't think they're bad.
Like that's Mannfred on there, but the mount looks cool. I don't know what it is, but it looks cool.
Bad. His face is also a little goofy, but I honestly count that as a positive.
Also, I wouldn't say it looks like Lego
because he is a goober. We're gonna move on to Lord Downsides now. This entire video has been Lord Downsides for Manfred von Carstein, but let's get into specifics. If you want a character with any sort of morally redeeming quality, you don't want Manfred. As a member of the Death Grand Alliance, you probably expected this, but aside from Nagash himself, he's the worst of the options you can choose from. The single moment of pity he felt for someone he betrayed doesn't count, because he wouldn't have needed to feel pity if he didn't abandon his allies to die to begin with. He's also got a rather extensive loss record. He lost the Vampire Wars, the first because he decided Vlad needed to go. The third admittedly wasn't something you'd have planned for with the whole cursed book nonsense, but he still lost. He lost against Chaos the first time it showed up in AOS, and yes, I can judge him for that because Malekith did just fine. He kept losing throughout the end times, both during battles and with his overarching plan. He's just a loser. And of course, speaking of, the end times. He blew up the world. He made everything go wrong. He caused the original backup world to be destroyed. He brought back Nagash, which destroyed the Tomb Kings. Fun fact, while Nagash was ripping Nehekara a new asshole, Manfred said that if he had sided with Cetra, they might have taken on not only Nagash, but the forces of Chaos too. And either way, you can blame him for there being no more Tomb King minis around. And
I love the Tomb King, so I will blame him, yes. They're very cool looking.
First, he stabbed Balthasar Gelt in the back and caused Warhammer Fantasy to die. Even if you're only into Age of Sigmar and don't give a damn about fantasy, you gotta admit there's something off-putting about making a general be the guy who messed up so bad the previous world ended. As for tabletop cons, he's not too bad, honestly. With a 3-up save and 14 wounds, he's reasonably takey against chaff, but hard-hitting units or artillery can ruin his day. He can regenerate up to 6 wounds when he fights, but if your opponent decides to point every single cannon they have at him, he's probably not going to make it very long. The monster keyword also means that anything that particularly targets monsters is going to give him a real bad day, same with the fly ability. Add into the account his degrading stat line, and Manfred is going to get worse as the fight goes on unless he's causing enough damage to regenerate every time he's hurt. His price is probably the worst thing about him. Not as a purchase, at $85 we've certainly seen worse values from GW, but on a tabletop. 400 points even, which is pretty substantial and comes with the usual caveats.
400.
Smaller games just won't have Manfred, and larger games, losing him before he makes his points back can cripple you. Use him well to wipe away weaker units or characters, and keep him away from someone like Archaon or Eltharion. Dedicated powerhouses in either magic or melee can put him down, so you'd best use him wisely. And that's Manfred von Carstein. Piece of garbage. I hate him. I hope he explodes. Thanks for coming.
We all hope he explodes.
If you're wondering how he plays in Total War, I actually have very simple advice for that. Download the Nagash mod instead. That way you can recruit Manfred without having to rely on Manfred. Good times. Thank you as always to my wonderful channel members.
There's
You
a
are the
cash
treachery
mod.
to my Manfred von Carstein, getting me everywhere I need to be. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to subscribe or
wonder what
become
he
a
has to
member.
say at the very
Either
end,
way,
though.
thank you for watching and take care
Me
out
too.
there.
So,
Let's see.
that's the bitch.
You know what I hope the old world brings? Just a special segment of every single named character lining up to kick Manfred square in the balls. Give him a special feature that says if you choose to have your enemy's general fight him, on a 6th wound they kick him square in the nuts and he explodes. Make an entire non-canon timeline where everyone comes together out of sheer shared hatred for Manfred.
Well then, that's one way to do it.
Bring back my pirate.
You want the pirates?
I want the pirates.
Well then. Hello. Oh, I don't know why I said hello. Thank you so much for coming by. What did you think of knowing fully about Manfred von Carstein?
I know what I expected, and that's about what I expected.
Him to be Warhammer Starscream?
Him to be a massive douche.
Yeah, I can see that. So, thank you all so much for coming by. If you like what we're doing here, tell us what other videos you want us to watch. Tell us down below what else you think we should watch. And, yeah, like, comment if you want us to do more of these things, because that informs me and tells me you want us to do more of these things. So, yeah, I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.
Bye.